I wanted to ask you, how did you first get interested in space?
I grew up in Las Vegas. In fact, I was born in Las Vegas, Nevada, so I've been around that city for a long time. And in the 1950s, the city was very small, maybe 20,000 population, 20 some odd thousand. And back in those years, all the nuclear testing was done above ground. So it was a fun, exciting kind of town to live in, not just because of the gambling, which everybody is very used to today, but believe it or not, back when I was a kid, a city or town that lived off of gaming was not just unusual, it was almost shameful. So when I went to visit other folks outside the town, I didn't kind of admit where I was from. As a kid, I was a little hesitant to do that. But I did talk about the bombs going off above ground. Nellis Air Force Base was an exciting thing, a large Air Force base, and there were a lot of jets going over, and we didn't have the kind of prohibitions against breaking sound barriers then. So they were busting windows all the time, and so there was a lot going on. And to be really honest with you, back in those years, there was also something else going on that was very strange. And that was that there were a lot of UFO reports. And I began to hear this occasionally from some of my friends. Their parents would talk. And then one time when I was around maybe 10 years old, I finally heard the story from my own grandparents, who lived next door to me as I grew up, and with my mother's parents. And so, come to find out, they had had a very scary experience one night when they were driving their car in a remote area outside the valley, and they were coming home. And it really shook them up. And it was something that was right in their face kind of situation. And they had also seen something else later in daylight, broad daylight. So when members of your own family tell you those kinds of things, you take them seriously. And I can remember that my father began to research whatever few books there were on the topic of UFOs way back then, and he was caught up in of course, such a phenomenal topic, and I found it really interesting. So sometime when I was an early teenager, I kind of decided, boy, if I ever had the money, I wanted to do something with my life that was connected to space, some kind of a space activity. And I decided, well, I wasn't born rich, so, and I wasn't going to likely discover gold or oil or something. So I decided that that real estate was probably the path to acquiring some money. So I devoted myself to that industry, and I have done most every kind of activity in real estate world that you can think of, from financing to construction and sales and you name it, management, everything that my companies have done. So in the late 90s is when I decided, well, I'm not getting any younger. I'm going to go ahead and start spending money and seeing if I can have some fun and get involved in the space business.
So when did you first discover the TransHab technology?
I was reading a magazine, and I read this article about the TransHab, and in that article, I mentioned that Congress was cutting the funding of that program, and I couldn't believe it. I thought, I just don't understand this. It was, even from that article, it was obvious that technology was terrific and was going to be far better than the aluminum cans were. And so I started investigating and checking into it, and sure enough, the article was spot on. Congress did cut the funding, and the reason was that NASA's purpose to that architecture was to send astronauts to Mars. And at that time, Congress would have none of it. So they sucked the money away, took it away, and the program folded.
How long was it after that you acquired the, property rights for it that you began working?
It was a few years. I started the company in '99 and didn't hire too many people. I was involved in building at that time 5,000 apartments in Texas and Arizona. And so I had that construction program that was ongoing for about 3 or 4 years, 3 years, I guess. And let's see, well, I guess it was around 2002 that that program pretty much wound down. And at that time, I started ramping up our aerospace company, and we were working on just faith that we were going to be allowed to work on this architecture, and that NASA wouldn't hurt us in some way or interfere. And through some effort, a couple of years later, around maybe 04 or 05, we acquired the exclusive licenses to the patent that they had. But the patent that they had didn't come with any manual. There was no how-to do anything. It turned out that their work was extremely preliminary.
So which is more fun, real estate or space?
Space, absolutely, hands down. And of course, you remember when I said that it was always my passion from being the time I was a little kid, and that I went on a premeditated path to try to have some money to work with. So absolutely space.